Hello, hello, dear listeners. Let's do this, shall we? So, we're going to talk today about perfectionism. We're going to cozy up to her. We're going to say, hello there, we see you. What are we going to do with you? And as we look at perfectionism, we're going to explore, gain new awareness around flavors of perfectionism, some of the ways that perfectionism can show up in our lives. We're going to do this for the sake of our own awareness of how we may be holding ourselves to impossible standards, how we may be holding others to impossible standards, how we may be buying in to the impossible standards that our culture or society are setting. And we're going to look at some of the costs, like what's at stake if we are operating with this paradigm. And then finally, rather than say, here's your quick fix, here's a solution, I'm going to offer questions to spark your own awareness. Where are you at on this continuum? And what might be a simple shift that you can make today to move into integrity with yourself? Now, before I jump in, I want to tell a story. And this comes from a conversation I had this week with a dear friend and former colleague. And he had reached out and shared with me that he's starting a new job. Somewhat, one might argue, quickly. He had been in another job for the better part of a year. But this is a person who has had a lot of loyalty, stayed in a few companies over the course of his career for longer chunks of time. Certainly has had different, it's not like someone who's been at the same place or even two places. That said, it's a year is a short tenure for this person's career as you look over the history. So I was like, tell me all about it, catching up, hearing about it. And the thing I want to tell you is that he described it to me, the move, as impulsive. And specifically, one could call it an impulsive move, and I get that, and then proceeded to say all the reasons why he was so excited about making this shift. And I, being who I am, and in the relationship I had with this person, was like, can I say something I'm noticing? Like, you're using the word, and this person said, yes, I could say it. So with permission, and love, I offered the noticing that they used the word impulsive to describe the move, which I n- I believe has a negative connotation. And I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you love this word. But impulsive having this negative connotation. And yet it didn't feel to me that this person actually felt the move was impulsive. And we teased it apart, as we do. And we're able to see together that it's actually other people who would look at this move maybe and say impulsive. And that might be from their own self-judgment of what it would be like for them to make a move like that. It might be kind of a cultural feeling of, well, what does it mean to jump ship after a year? But for this particular person, he really felt in integrity with that decision. And he went on to describe it and say, there's been these different phases of my career where different things mattered. By the way, can you notice the difference in language of impulsive versus like beginning to narrate? Here's my professional chapters and values orientation. And here's what mattered. Here's what was important to me. And as this person went on, he said, okay, so there was this chapter of my career where title really mattered to me. And then title became less important. I had climbed to a certain title, I had achieved something and felt like, okay, well, that's enough. There could be more, but this is enough. And then compensation became really important. And he was able to achieve a certain compensation where he said, you know what, and that's enough. It's not that I couldn't achieve more, but this really feels like it's enough. And what became really important to me was feeling like I really enjoyed the day-to-day of my job. And that was something that was missing in the last job. And when I looked at how he described it, I thought, okay, here we go. Like, I know what matters. I understand that there may be a perception that what I'm doing is impulsive, but I'm so clear that what I'm looking for, and I've got a baseline of what already has mattered to me. So there wasn't a sacrifice, like compensation and title were holding steady. But this new dimension of, and I'm really enjoying my day to day, entered in. And that was enough. That gave this person, as they went on to describe it, like a feeling of ease of like, I didn't have to keep vetting. I had really, by a lot of standards, few conversations now, but those few conversations had a lot of connections to other trusted people and resources, and that was enough. Now, why am I telling you this story in a podcast episode about perfectionism? Let me draw the connection. This is what's at stake when we are leading, being driven with the undercurrent of perfectionism. And we'll talk about the different flavors of that in a minute. What's at stake is that we're not focused on what matters to us, either because we don't know what that is, or because we know, but we're so busy trying to attain someone else's standard or even our own internal standard, such that we won't prioritize what we know really matters to us. Well, I don't want to be perceived as being impulsive. Therefore, I'll just stay where I am and just like, shouldn't I appreciate it because I have the compensation, I have the title. And even though I want to also enjoy the day to day of my job, I'm not going to rock the boat of perfectionism, of an impossible standard. And I'm just going to let that slide. I can make that trade off. That's what's at stake. And in a world where it is my wish that we all set our vision, like we see what we really want, and then we can actually move with it, lead with it, embody it. We can't let perfectionism get in our way. That's why we're talking about this today. I want you all to be able to make the kind of move that my old friend and colleague made. And not that there wasn't the undercurrent, like, using impulsive instead of intentional. And yet, this person was clearly not led by that. They could feel it, they were holding some of the pressures of it, but they still made a choice counter to what others might have expected, driven by an internal sense of what mattered, what was important. Okay, flavors of perfectionism. There are three: self-oriented, other-oriented, socially prescribed. So I'm sharing this in the sense of we can't change what we don't see. When we have more distinctions, we can start to untangle the web of what's inspiring us, what's motivating us, what's driving us. So, not just perfectionism, but is this perfectionism self-oriented, i.e., I expect this of myself? As I shared in the intro, I am no stranger to perfectionism. My particular strain of perfectionism is self-oriented. Like really I have real deep self-generated expectations on like what I think things should look like, feel like, the experience of it. And an example of this is that actually kept me for a long time from having people stay with me, at least not with any kind of frequency, is that I really thought that if you host someone, that the house should be clean, the meals should be exquisite, like it should feel really special. Special to an impossible standard. And I really credit a dear friend of mine who because of her work schedule, periodically came to visit my home about once a month during the time of when I had three young children. And in fact, probably during the time when I had two young children and was pregnant, and then a third child came in, and maybe even while after the second one was born, I got really sick. Like it was a time where like I couldn't once a month for a few days keep up with the expectation in my head. And as a result, it was like, well, I obviously can't do that. But she's coming no matter what. And she really would rather stay with me, I think, than go to a hotel. So, like, band-aids ripped off. Like, she came in and the trash wasn't taken out. She joined us for dinner and it was like boxed pasta and, like, a cool sauce that my husband made. And, uh, but like just kind of thrown together, helter skelter. We ate later than what my perfectionist mind, I thought we should be eating at, like all of these things. And that really helped me, like, be in the practice of imperfection, or one might say being in the practice of being human, because we are all imperfect. There is no such thing as best or right or perfect. Right? That's just what that means, is that we think there's one way that's optimal. And I'm just here to say, yes, and there's many bests and many rights and many perfects. So, self oriented is something that's really emerging from within you. Other oriented. Other oriented perfectionism is something that you are taking in that you believe someone else is expecting you um, to do. You know what? Oh my gosh. Here is a chance for me to practice being imperfect. I'm incorrect. I'm mixing up my distinctions. Forget what I just said. I'm not going to edit this part out because I want to demonstrate. Listen, friends, I have these notes in front of me and I was like, wait, that's not right. I'm not reading this correctly. No. Okay. Rewinding. Other oriented is when you are placing your expectation of perfectionism on someone else. So this is now not just, here's what I think I have to perform, but here's what I expect you to perform. We could probably invite my husband on and he could tell you how this also shows up for me. And this is the one where you're saying, child, this is what I expect you to do. Partner, this is what I expect you to do. Colleague, this is what I expect you to do. Client, this is what I expect you to do. Now, I certainly can see how this can show up for me personally, as I was, somewhat teasingly, but also I can see, I'm like, why don't we have dinner on the table? By we, I mean you, husband, who's actually cooks the dinners. That's my expectation, that you should have been able to pick up the children and figured out what we're going to eat and have it prepared and like ready to go. And you have to kind of decipher between, where is there a capacity issue, or where is there a competency issue, or so capacity, I actually have the time and space and ability in my day to complete something. Competency, I know how to do it and I have the capacity. So you can look at these different flavors of it, like what's the flaw, but sometimes, so it's not that you can't hold people to an expectation or invite them to rise to something that's new. However, if what you expect is, I think you can do this and you can do that and you can do this and you can do that, and when you look at it, you're like, actually, like, there's not the time in the day to do that. And this is what you're asking of someone else. Like, this is what it looks like in practice. And actually, I'm going to give an example. This is, I was just sparked of an old client from many years ago that I worked with. She was a senior executive in the federal government, and she was looking at like what she wanted to accomplish at home and at work. And the move I made as her coach was to say, okay, like let's get into it. I am on the train of like, let's get it all done. Let's map it out. When is it all going to get done? And we rolled up our sleeves. We looked at it by the kind of a week by week, then layering up to like a month by month, quarter by quarter. And that was kind of enough. Like, we knew there were rhythms to the year, but it was like mostly focused on the week and then those rhythms, and then layering a few other details month to quarter. Okay. And what quickly happened was, one, when we actually rolled up our sleeves, it didn't take that long to do that exercise. And she was able to look at it and say, oh, Well, what I notice without judgment, which is what you're asking me to do, Sharon, is that it's not realistic for me to do all these things, but I feel inside of me that I should. Perfectionism. That's perfectionism at work. That's how it's showing up. That feeling that I should be able to do this. And then cascade this out back to other oriented. Imagine that same kind of thing of what you're asking of others. Unrealistic expectations of what you're expecting people to be able to perform to, other oriented. Socially prescribed is the third flavor of perfectionism. This is the one I started to describe before falsely because I, friends, am super imperfect. Socially prescribed perfectionism are things that we are inheriting from the culture. And question mark on, is it real? Is it not real? So this might be what my boss is expecting me, what the culture of my workplace is expecting me to perform, um, what my coach, maybe a leadership coach, sports coach, what my coach is expecting me to perform. Like I feel the pressures. What is society expecting me to perform? What are they expecting me to perform as a mom? What about as a working mom? What about as a wife? What about as a person in her fourth decade? Right? These kinds of questions. Socially prescribed perfectionism. Okay. So the first question that I want to invite you to consider is, what do you notice without judgment, just like I invited my client all those years ago to do? What do you notice without judgment about how perfectionism shows up for you? I can promise you it's showing up in some way, shape, or form. Like you're either feeling it from the culture, you are bringing it into your expectations of others, you are holding yourself to it, maybe degrees. But just what do you notice when you cozy up and say, hello there? What do you notice about how it's showing up for you? That's the necessary starting point. And then, how's that working for you? How is that working for you? Cozy up to that. Get close. The next two questions that I want you to hold really bring you to a sense of purpose, delight. Like this is the counter. This is what that friend I caught up with who took the new job, what he had. I want you to ask yourself, what brings me joy? What brings me joy? That's the Marie Kondo. Anyone remember her? I'm a Marie Kondo fan. What sparks joy? What brings you joy? And another flavor of this, what's important to you right now? Maybe you segment that out to a certain part of your life. What's important to me in my work right now? What's important to me, even more specifically, in my role at work right now? What's important to me in my partnership right now? What's important to me with my friend circle right now? What's important to me as a parent right now, as a partner, as a auntie, as a fill in the blank? What's important right now? And then I want you to think about this. What's enough? When I consider what sparks joy, what matters to me, what's important, what's enough? Maybe you time box that. Like, what's enough when I think about what's enough between now and the end of the year? What's enough in my life? What's enough as I think about this area of focus? What's enough? And now I want you to cozy up to something that might feel difficult. I want you to cozy up to, what is the cost of perfectionism for you, for the people around you? for me, it's that things don't feel sustainable. And I get so frustrated that I just, it's like a breakdown. Like I'm trying, breakdown. I might yell, I might cry, I might, I can see myself in the moment being triggered and I'm like, I'm having an out of body experience where I know this is not what I think really matters, but like I'm in it now. I'm in my perfectionism spin cycle. And it's not fun to be around me when that's happening. And it feels terrible. Now I'm resilient. I can bounce back. I can take a breath. I can apologize. I can get better. I can get support. I do those things. And I'm imperfect. And I can see what those costs are. And I can see the benefits of not leading with this as a primary driver. I have a feeling she'll always still show up for me. And I'm like, hey there, see you. Get back in your corner. Get on out of here. So think about, what are the costs for you? And finally, what's a simple shift you could make today? What's one thing you could do? For me, particularly in the time of year we're in, there's two things that I'm really practicing right now. One, taking deep breaths. Like just that, like, I'm exaggerating my breath here, but that deep breath before responding, like just that little disruption before I jump in, that really helps me. The second thing that I'm really practicing right now is writing out what's on my immediate to-do list. So I have a day by day, and this is specific for work because I see how if I'm structured in work, it kind of helps me in the flow of feeling like I've got more space in my personal life, just the moment I'm in this season of my life. So it's a simple tactic that's working for me. And I write it out and then I can look each day. I'm like, okay, cross off what I completed and is done, note where I have extra things to do, and either add those things for follow up that I need to do to my next day or just get them done. And so just I'm like, oh, okay, I'm on it. Feels clear, clean, organized. What's a simple shift you could make today? And that, my dear, beautiful, fabulous listeners, wildly imperfect and human as you are, that is what I wanted to share with you today. Please know that no matter where you are as you are listening to this episode, it is my deep wish that what you heard today will empower you to design yourself, to be clear on what matters, and to lead, to move, to embody that. That is my wish. If I can be a support, if you want to share a success, if you want to say, can you help me? I have a question. I welcome hearing from you. You can go to pointroadstudios.com where you will find the show notes and these questions. Also the contact button where you can contact, and that will come straight to me. I will read your kind words. I will read your questions. You will hear from me personally. So no, I invite that in. I would welcome that. I'm inviting on the day where I feel overwhelmed by that. um, and that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you today. In closing, please know that no matter where you are on your perfectionism journey, I am here holding my deeply held belief that there is nothing stopping you. So go on ahead and get after whatever it is that you really want.